you could get sued for owning a manual Jeep Gladiator. This is absolutely absurd. Well, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome back to Rob Motive JT. And that's right, you could actually get sued for owning a manual Jeep Gladiator. You know, before I took off on my cruise this morning, and that's what we're doing, we're out kind of cruising around, stretching the legs of the Jeep Gladiator, I read a story. I was checking out the news, you know, I do that occasionally, as depressing as it is. But I was checking out the news and I came across a story about a Jeep owner being sued who happens to own a manual transmission. And that's key to the story here, the manual transmission. Now, this happened to be a Jeep Wrangler, but it could easily happen in a Jeep Gladiator as well. So let me tell you what happened. This is just absurd to me. So there's a guy, he owns a Jeep Wrangler, and he took it to the dealership to have the oil changed. So a tech, 19-year-old kid, I guess, did the oil change. It was on a lift, all that stuff. Puts the truck down, or the Jeep down, and decides he needs to start it up so that he can get the oil circulating. Now, this is a good thing because you want to have your tech make sure that there's no leaks or anything like that, and then recheck the oil level, of course, once it runs through the engine a little bit. So he does that. He puts it down. He goes to start the Jeep up, and it won't start. He's got his foot on the brake. You know, you have to put your foot on the brake, whatever, to start the vehicle. And this is a manual transmission. So it won't start. Well, obviously it won't start because you have to depress the clutch, right? Now, he's standing outside of the vehicle while he's doing this. So he's kind of straddling the entry, if you will, pushing on the pedals with his right foot. So he figures this out, I guess, or has a moment of clarity, I don't know, and he pushes down on the clutch. Keep in mind, the Jeep is now down on the ground. Pushes in on the clutch, starts it up, lifts his foot off the clutch, and of course, if you're familiar with manual transmissions, it lurches forward. It lurches forward because they put it in gear, obviously, when they parked it. I guess a good reason to not put your Jeep in gear and just leave it with the parking brake pulled. But nonetheless, it was in gear and it lurches forward. It hits another tech. This guy is 42 years old, probably has a family and kids and all that stuff, who knows. But it kills him, which is sad. That's unfortunate, the bad part about the story. Now, here we go. A lawsuit is filed. They file a $15 million lawsuit. Apparently, they can't sue the dealership for some reason because it was the fault of an employee. Who knows? And I'm sure this 19-year-old kid probably doesn't have any money anyway. So they go after the owner of the Jeep Wrangler, the manual transmission owner of the Jeep Gladiator, or the Jeep Wrangler, I should say. Which to me is just absurd. He had turned the Jeep over to the dealership to do the oil change in good faith, and he hadn't altered anything. It's not like he disconnected the parking brake or made the truck super sensitive with the clutch or anything like that. But this family, I guess it sounds like, is suing the owner of the Jeep Wrangler, the manual transmission Jeep Wrangler, because it killed their family member. $15 million worth. Absolutely absurd. And where the manual transmission comes into this, number one, it most likely wouldn't have happened had it not been a manual, because if it was an automatic, it would have been in park, right? It wouldn't have lurched forward. Since it was a manual, it did. And the kid, admittedly, I believe, according to the story, was not familiar with the manual transmission. He didn't know how to drive a manual transmission, apparently knew enough that he had to depress the clutch. Maybe he had done it before, I don't know. But he was not familiar enough with it to know what would happen if you pop the clutch, which is what he did, let the clutch off, while the vehicle is running. This is one of the craziest things I've ever heard. First of all, if anybody's liable, it has to be the kid, the tech, and the dealership, but certainly not the car owner. I think there should be, and I can't believe there isn't, but some assumption that when you turn a vehicle over to someone else, they are responsible for that vehicle. I mean, imagine another scenario. You know, you loan your car to somebody and there's an accident and unfortunately somebody is hurt or killed, and now they're going to come back to you, the owner of the vehicle. Even though you weren't driving it, you did turn it over willingly, but you weren't driving it, and somehow now you are liable for it. It's just absurd to me. Now, doesn't mean that they're going to win, of course. I mean, you can sue anybody for anything these days. You know, you could sue somebody for looking at you funny. Now, that of course doesn't mean that the judge isn't going to throw it out because it's a frivolous or ridiculous lawsuit. But still, it's going to cost you something, if nothing other than time, because you're going to have to show up in court, and you better be prepared to defend yourself, because on any given day, who knows what can happen. So here is just another example, I suppose, of people not knowing how to drive manual transmissions these days. And it might even start to create some chatter of doing away with the manual transmission because they're dangerous. Because once they're put into the hands of someone who doesn't know how to operate them, something bad could happen. Like this, for example. So I don't know, I just thought it was absolutely absurd. I read this story, and number one, that it happened to begin with. Again, it's unfortunate that that had to happen to that guy. But two, that somehow the family or the owner of the Jeep Wrangler in this case is liable because the kid who took it to do the work did not know how to drive a manual transmission. It's just crazy to me. Unbelievable. Anyway, just another nail in the coffin of the manual transmission. I can just hear the chatter now. Manuals should be outlawed because some people don't know how to drive them. Anyway, leave a comment. Let me know what you think about this. Do you think that indeed the owner of the Jeep Wrangler, the manual transmission owner, should somehow be liable because the person that had possession of it, willingly took possession of it, caused something bad to happen to someone else? I'd be curious to know your opinion. Also, real quick, I do have 2 additional channels. Rob Motive, all about the Toyota Tacoma, which, by the way, still does offer a manual transmission, so beware, Tacoma owners. And Rob Motive MT, all about mini trucks. Currently, the Hyundai Santa Cruz. Check them out, and if you're interested, please consider subscribing. Thanks for watching. Stay safe out there. Bye.